Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Drive in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. We're glad you decided to check us out. God has a specific message of hope for your life and mine today. So listen up.
I love it when the church comes together and when we get together. There's a verse in Ephesians, in Ephesians 4, it talks about when the church comes together, when we're using our gifts for each other. The exposure that we have to what God's doing among us brings us to maturity. You may not realize that. That's one of the reasons we have churches, because God's ordained that's how things go. You know, this Sunday's special because it's kind of we call it Vision Sunday, because really what this is about is kind of setting the tone for our year. What are the things that we as a church are going to be focusing on? We've gone through a lot of changes in the past year, past 2 years, launching from First Baptist, changing a lot of the way we do things, and there's some new opportunities on the horizon, and praying over what God, what do you want us to do this year? What are we to focus on? Where do you want us to be a part of the fabric of your gospel work in this town? Because I don't know whether you know it or not, we're in a rough place to be. It seems like cool. We got all these little dense neighborhoods and stuff. But I'm going to be honest with you, talking with several people who are church planners, talking with over the years, this is a tough place to plant a church because the gospel is not super prevalent among the people in Palm Bay. And it's difficult to plant churches sometimes in this area. So God, where do you want us to be? When we started Bay West, our mission here is to make disciples here and everywhere for the glory of God. That means we want to be a disciple-making church. What that means, Steve did a great job last week preaching and sharing with us what a disciple is, what it means to be a disciple. A short definition of that, it kind of encapsulates a lot of what Steve talked about. Really, as I look at as a disciple is someone who knows and loves Jesus, who's growing more and more like Jesus, and leads lost and saved people, all the people around them, closer to Jesus. Now, does that mean that everybody that you meet, you lead them to Jesus and you get them to make a commitment to follow Christ? No, but as they know your life, they get a closer picture of what Jesus is. Maybe not through your perfection. Maybe God changes you and you emulate the characteristics of Christ. We want you to grow more like Jesus. But not only that, but that they see through your failures and forgiveness and how you push on through the things that are tough for you. They see the amazing grace and love of God in you, and how you forgive and how you rebound when you screw up, and the trust that you place in God, that when I mess up, God forgives me. I go to God, I ask for forgiveness, I receive that forgiveness, and I can move forward with that, not counting against the debt for eternity and joy and confidence. Seeing those things lets people know more about who Jesus is. And we're here to make disciples. And go, how do we make disciples in Palm Bay? Now, there's some verses of Scripture that really impacted me when we first started Bay West. And God led me back to these, to what are we supposed to be in the city. It's in Jeremiah 29. And before we go there, I want to give you a little backstory about Jeremiah 29. It's really it's a letter that's written in this 29. It's a letter from Jeremiah that God caused him to write and send to people who were Jews who were exiled in Babylon, which is a separate country. They had come and taken over. They'd come actually twice. They'd come to Judah and Jerusalem, and they'd invaded and taken some captives back, and they wanted to go get some more. They went over there, took them out, took them back. And so here's the people that are left in Judah and Jerusalem. Jeremiah's there, and he writes this letter to the exiles in Babylon. Now, not of them all would eventually, everybody that's in Judah and Jerusalem, they'd eventually get captured and carried over to Babylon too. But this was sent to a letter to the leaders specifically there. And it talked a lot about how they were to exist in this country that was foreign to them, in this country that wasn't necessarily embracing of their faith. And when I was looking at that situation, Babylon is known a lot of times as a place where, self-gratification abounds, a lot of idolatry and things like that. And when I looked at that, I could see so much, sadly, of our own country. We're becoming more and more secular as we go, and as we try to release from the Judeo-Christian background that we are with. And this is not a political speech, but it's just a look at our culture. I think we can all agree with that. There's more and more prevalence of non-Christian things as Christian things kind of subside. So how do we, and the culture and the powers and the authorities sometimes are not really friendly, to what we would espouse as following Christ, okay? We know that's true. So how do we exist? And I'm looking at, okay, here's these exiles who had a little bit of freedom. They could do some things. They could kind of live and work, but they were forced to live inside this country that did not share their faith and love and respect for an almighty God. And it's interesting to look at where they are. When you see this situation, it mirrors kind of where we are. And God, and a few caveats about this, so you know, there was this is kind of a specific set of instructions sent to the Jews, right? But because it's in the Bible, because God chose to put it there, because of the similarities to our situation, we can see kind of God's heart about how I want you to react. It's a good strategy, a good plan for us to remember in a tough situation. I want to start in verse 4 and read this. This is what the Lord of heaven's armies said. The God of Israel says to all the captives He has exiled to Babylon from Jerusalem. Now, the first thing I want you to see here, this is sent to the exiles, like I said, but it's an interesting thing here. It says that it's talking about God. God has exiled them. He's placed them in that country. He's placed them in a place that is not friendly to their beliefs. It's going to make it harder for them to worship Him, harder for them to live by a standard, because people around them don't agree. And I'm like, you know what? That's very similar to where we are. But do you realize, do you take this to heart, that God has placed you, if you follow Jesus, in the specific location that you are right now? God placed you there. He placed you in the center of the job. He placed you in the center of the center of your neighborhood. He placed you in this town. He placed you in the career path. If you followed Him here, God's put you there. And right now, His will is sovereign. So where you are, it's where you are. That's where God wants you to serve Him and share the light of Christ. That is very similar to the exiles that were in Babylon there. God put them there. He dropped them into a situation kind of behind enemy lines in a lot of ways. You know why? Because there were people in Babylon that needed to see people that worshiped God. Just like there are people in your neighborhood, in your job, in your school, in the places that you go, in the convenience stores that you stop in, and the people that you service in your job, the people that you buy from, that you're customers and clients for, they need to see God in you. So very similar type of situation. Paul says in Philippians 3:20, says that when we start to follow Christ, our citizenship changes to be a citizen of heaven. Do you realize that? When you accepted Christ, you found a citizenship that superseded your citizenship to the United States. That's weird, but it's true. It superseded it, but it also dovetailed into it, because God always teaches us too. We're supposed to be good citizens. We're supposed to be apart. We're supposed to be solid in the area that we live. So it all works together. But ultimately, our allegiance lies to heaven and to God and those things. So we're here in this increasingly secular culture. Palm Bay is really known as a secular place. In church culture especially, when we talk about church places, it's a tough place to plant a church. It really is. Satan has had a hold on this town for a long time. In the past few years, you've heard me talk about there are some things that it's been top 5 per capita in the United States in you've heard it for divorce, for alcohol abuse and addiction, for home foreclosure, financial issues. Now, we're getting a little bit better, praise God. I believe that's some of the work that God's doing here, but it's not all that He's trying to do. He has so much more to do. We have an increasing drug problem here. Do you realize in a period of time last fall, there was 2 weeks where in our indirect community, in Brevard community in Palm Bay, we had 7 homicides due directly to drug trade. In the last year, 8 young men in Palm Bay have been shot and killed directly due to drug situations. This is not an easy place to live. We have and you know what that tells me? It tells me that we have a populace of people who need something. They're trying to find something because there's a problem here on the inside. And that's where they are. That's where we are. I mean, we found Jesus, and praise God, but we found Jesus because there was something on the inside that wasn't right. We have a commonality with all people because all people are that way, but Palm Bay is an increasingly secular place. You know, we are, they were in a place where they didn't fit the culture. We don't really fit the culture completely. As we start to follow Christ and the culture goes this way because the culture is run by sin primarily. You know, sin is meant to go directly against God. We head toward Jesus. They head away. You know, we don't fit the culture. People who will ultimately, the truth is that ultimately we won't be here anymore at some time, right? We all know that, the Bible tells us a man's appointed once to die. At some point we're going to die. Or either we're going to be raptured and head to heaven. But, if we're following Christ, we know where we're going. Our citizenship lies in heaven. Ultimately, that's where we're going to be. This is a temporary destination for us. I got to think, when you look at the Babylonians, the Jews in exile over there, what I'm about to show you that God is telling them to do, it was probably a tough situation for them to stomach and to grasp. But so how do we survive in the middle of this? In the middle of that, how do we not just survive, but how do we thrive in the middle of it? How do we make disciples here and everywhere for the glory of God in the middle of a situation of people that don't know Jesus, aren't friendly to Jesus, or even worse sometimes, think that they know who Jesus is, and are living based on a faulty explanation of who Christ is and who Christ should be in their life. I've seen so many people who say they follow Christ, and I hear this, I've heard this before, and I've shared this with you. I tried Jesus, but it didn't work. I tried Jesus, but it didn't work. That didn't work. I tried it didn't work for me. And I always come back and say, well, then you never really did try Jesus. Because it's a whole life thing. You didn't stay long enough with Him. Or you saw something faulty. And when I talk to them, a lot of the times, the picture that they have of the gospel is very different than what I have. I love engaging in conversations like that. I don't want to debate anybody. Well, really? Okay, you tried Jesus, didn't work. Well, why? Why didn't it work for you? Maybe you're telling me something I need to know. Maybe it's not going to work for me at some point. Share with me. That's okay. They're not going to shake me. I want to hear what you got to say. Okay, well, but what about this? I said, well, that's not really what the gospel says. I had to go to church all the time, and I had to be at these meetings, and, I just suffer through these meetings. Well, that's kind of not just the point is you know Christ. It's not you don't. And if I'm not going to be a good Christian if I don't go to church, okay, well, necessarily Christians go to church because that's what Christians are bent to do. They see the value in it, but they go to church because they love Jesus. They don't go to church to make Jesus love them. I find that so much in our culture. So many things that you find are not right in our culture. They need people who know. And that's from us, So how do we survive? Well, God outlined a great strategy for that. And it seems like, I'm going to share this with you and go, not rocket science, but yes it is. In verse 5, it says, build homes. Okay, here's what you do. And plan to stay. Plant gardens and eat the food they produce. Marry and have children. Then find spouses for them so that you may have many grandchildren. Multiply. Do not dwindle away. What he's saying there is plug into where you are. He said, guys, I want you to plug into this Babylonian place I've got you to live. You're going to be here a while. Some of you guys won't leave. I want you to build homes. I want you to plan to stay. I want you to plant gardens. I want you to eat the food that those gardens produce. I want you to marry. I want you to have children. I want you to find spouses for your kids so that you can have many grandchildren. I want you to multiply. I don't want you to dwindle away. I don't want you to pull back from this culture. In our Christian church culture sometimes, we tend to, here's a stat that killed me. This killed me, okay? And I'm going to probably bring this up twice, but in 5 years, there's a study done a while back, and I was listening to Alan Hirsch speak, who's really good with missional living and stuff like that. He said in 5 years, when someone plugs into a church, they don't have a meaningful relationship outside of the church. You know what that means? You go, wow, that's great. You know, they've come into the community. They love everybody in the church. They love doing life with people in the church. And that's great. But do you know what that also means? It means there's nobody that's close to them that they can share Christ with outside of the church. When we become so invested inside here that we turn our eyes away from who's out there, how do we make disciples if everybody we know already knows Christ? How do we make disciples? How do we bring people closer to Christ? We just kind of put a moat around the building and stay in here, and when fire and brimstone rains down on them, we're all good, under the shield of God. Is that how we're going to live? No, that's not what Jesus did. There's a movement now. I love it. And I see it on online stuff so much. It's just prevalent through our culture. I'm going to get all the toxic people out of my life. I'm going to get rid of all the toxic people. Well, they give me a hard time. I'm going to get rid of that. I don't like that influence. I'm going to get rid of you. I'm going to tell you right now, that's not Jesus. That's not what Jesus did. Jesus said, toxic people, let me embrace you. But do you know how he lasted that? And the reason that people say that, and I get it, I really do. Toxic people can drain the whole out of your life. They can drain the energy from you. It can happen. But the way you do that is not by avoiding. The way you withstand that is not by avoiding that. The way is also having, honestly, people that you love, that know Jesus, that encourage you, that pull you up, that embrace you, so that you can ultimately be plugged into Christ. And he will feed the energy into your life so that you can show his light to people around you who are toxic. At some level, we all are. Everybody that you've seen that doesn't know Jesus, we're all at some point infected by this cancer called sin, by choice and by nature. We've been born that way. We want to go against God. We've made a choice to move that on our own. At some time or another, we've gone against God. And we know that the wages of that sin is what it's called, is death. Everybody you see at some level is toxic. Some people are just more easy to take socially. But and where it counts, in the eternal scheme of things, everyone's toxic. And God has called us and left us here to be part of helping him. Well, we don't really help him. We're just a part of watching him do amazing things. And out of the goodness and graciousness of his heart, he builds a relationship with us as we get to share with others and help their lives take an upturn as they're plugged back into him. That's part of what we're here for. A pivotal reason that we run the programming that we do at Bay West, see, a lot of that's just do the normal things that you do. Just do what you do. Do the normal things that you do within the culture. I want you to do that, but there's something else that goes along with it. Part of the reason we run our programming here at Bay West, we don't have 1,000 meetings here every week. You know why? Because I want you to have time to be able to plug into the culture, to be a part of where we are, so that you can know neighbors, you can know friends, you can know things, so that hopefully we can make disciples. But verse 7 tells us why, brings it back home to what we should do. He was telling them, he said, look, I want you to work for the peace and the prosperity of the city. Where I sent you, reinforces, I sent you there. I sent you into exile. Pray to the Lord for it, for its welfare will determine your welfare. In other words, what that word peace and prosperity is, it's the word there in Greek is shalom, and what that means is the wholeness. We talk about peace a lot of times when we talk about that, but it's not just an absence of conflict. We talked about that last month. That's a wholeness that people would ultimately, truthfully, be reconnected to God. That's what shalom truly is when you have a wholeness, your life is full and complete and perfect and you're reconnected to Christ and you feel that sense and your eternity is taken care of. That's what we're heading back toward. He says, I want you to pray for the peace and the prosperity of the city where I sent you to exile to work for it first, but I want you to pray to the Lord for it. For its welfare will determine your welfare. It says, I want you to work for the good of the city, basically. We've used that. You see on our Love the Bay shirts. That's why we had that. Charles is wearing one right back there in the back. He's got the big distressed heart that says the Bay, and on the bottom it says, for the good of the city, Jeremiah 29:7. That's something God worked into the fabric of our church from the beginning. And there's several ways to do that. One, you can be good neighbors. That's a good way to do it, where you're good to your neighbors and you're good to your community, and right there you're good in your neighborhood, and you can be that. A lot of us, we live in an increasing culture where we come in and when the garage goes up, we drive in the garage goes down, and we don't talk to anybody. I think we got to break out of that somewhat. We've got to be able to be a part. I challenge you to get to know the people that live around you, even if they're weird. Maybe you could help them be less weird. It's all right. Even if they their dog poops in your yard and they don't pick it up. Maybe if you get to know them, they won't do that anymore. Who knows? I don't know. But we can be good neighbors. The other thing is we can be good citizens. That translates past that. What are you doing do you think about how you fit into the community of Palm Bay? Do you say, what is my part in making Palm Bay better? What is that? How has God put that before you? We continue to reach out to people. That's part of the reason we do. A lot of times people ask, well, why do we go do these things out at, like, we'll go to the 4th of July thing, or we'll go do this, or we'll go help someone with Love the Bay. We'll go help a client, Is that to get people into our church so they give to our church and make our church bigger? No, I'm not. There's a bigger mission than this. I want to reach out to people and love and live for the good of our community, yes, so that they know that Jesus is the one that motivated us to do that they will honor Christ. And at some point, in some way, as part of as we and all the Christians team up in the part of Palm Bay, that they come to know Jesus and they become disciples who make disciples. We want to see that happen. They definitely would love to have them come here, but that's not the only goal. My goal, the overall mission that we have, is a mission that God gave us to make disciples. And Bay West supports that mission. That mission doesn't support Bay West. You see what I mean? See what I mean? I'm going to tell you something. We may never be a church of 6,000. They may never do a special on CNN for us. But we can just be just as successful and obedient, following God, doing exactly what He told us to do in the places that we are, and make more impact than we will ever realize this side of heaven. That can happen all the time. Being good citizens. But it also told all those good neighbors, good citizens, all that dovetails back to this, being good disciple makers. Because our mission that God gave us as individuals, and that God gave us as a church, in Matthew 28, 19 and 20, is to make disciples. We take that here. It says, go therefore and make disciples, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to obey all the things that I've commanded you. Lo, I'm with you always, even to the end of the age. Here's your thing. I want you to go and make disciples. A lot of people translate that as you go, which dovetails back into what he was talking about in verse 5 and 6. They were talking about as you go marry, as you build your houses, as you go to work and plant your food, as you do all this stuff, and do whatever you do, but however you do it, I want you to do it under the mission of following me. In other words, I want you to do under the mission of following, making disciples, this mission that Christ gave every one of us individually, not just the leaders. There's a reason that Jesus didn't make Matthew 28, 19, and 20 and put it in some handbook that you got some secret handbook you got when you were ordained as a pastor. Because it's not just the pastors, it's not just some special calling, it's anybody who follows Christ. Anybody who can read that and knows that is expected to be a part of doing that, making disciples. And teaching people to obey all the things that I've commanded you. That's what Jesus said. And He said, look, if you're freaked out, don't worry about it. I'm with you till the end of the age. I will be here. I will help you do that. That's what our mission is. And we can do all this. That's the reason we don't have 1,000 things here at churches, because I want you to be able to plug into your neighbors. I want you to be able to be a part of your school's PTA or whatever it is. I want you to have an opening to be a part of the community around you, because I hope that you become an influence to the people around you. That's the reason we mentor at Discovery Elementary. Somebody told me one time, said, we can go over there and mentor those kids. Are we expecting their families to come right back over here? How are we going to work them back in? Yes. I would love to have their families here, but you know what? That's not the end goal. The end goal is that those young men know that somebody who loves Jesus, who's motivated by Jesus, cares about them, and ultimately they are honored and left with a better picture of who Jesus is. That's kind of why we do it. When we go out and do Delivering Hope, Bill and Roger up here on the front go every week. We have some other guys that go every week and deliver MREs to people that live in homeless camps. Do we think that's going to solve the problem of hunger in our homeless camps? You think that's all just one day everybody's just going to give enough MREs that they just all of a sudden are perfectly okay? No. We're delivering hope. We're trying to build relationships so that they see that somebody who loves Jesus was motivated by God to reach out to them, getting nothing in return, but just to love, to follow Christ and to follow them, to love them, so that they will have a better picture of Christ and one day follow Him. And we may never know when that happens. You guys may lead them to Christ next week. And when they may show up and sit right beside you next week, I don't know. But you know what? It's not going to stop or base on whether we do that or not that makes this work, because we as a church support the mission of making disciples. The mission of making disciples isn't about making our church bigger. We hope that happens, but we have an overarching thing. And so we're here to live in the community to do that. You know, I mean, I'm gonna give an example. You know, we were, 2 years ago, we were getting ready to start Bay West. And someone mentioned to my wife about running for school board. And all that coincided with we're launching Bay West right about the time she's got to be voted on to get in school board. And we've never, run for anything. You guys know the story. It was very difficult, but the Lord worked. The Lord brought what we needed. The Lord got her elected to school board, and that's what she's doing. I'm going to be very honest with you. I struggled with that a lot. Because I was like, Lord, I get it, being good citizens. Why are you doing this? Because we're about to start a church. This is going to take laser focus and a lot of energy. Why are you pushing us this way? And I fought with the Lord for a long time. We went back and forth. I'm just like, why are you pushing this? And He would not let it go. He wouldn't let it go from her. He wouldn't let it go from me. And I'm like, look, I'm just doing this. I'm trying to be laser focused on what you want me to do. These things are coinciding. This is crazy. Why? I did. I said, Lord, that's crazy. Why do you want me to do this? I know there's not enough of Jim to do both of those at the same time. But the Lord said, no, I want you to do it. And I say us because it took our whole family. Katie's on the front lines, but it took our family making sacrifices and doing that. And it stretched us pretty thin. But we felt like that's what God wanted to do. I believe, and I look at that and I think, I think God was trying to make a statement, because I'm going, look, here's my church. I got to deal with these people. And God was saying, look, here's my church. I get to deal with all these people. And I think God was making a statement. And normally how you see God work in your life, I don't know if it works this way for you, but it does for me. He'll tell me to do something. And when I'm obedient, He doesn't always explain every reason that I'm doing it. He kind of, as we go along the path of obedience, God lets out an explanation of why we're doing it to some degree. Sometimes we don't know. Sometimes we know more. Sometimes we know less. But I ran across a quote from Craig Groeschel. I was going to, he said, if you want to reach the people that no one's reaching, you have to go the places that no one is going, and you have to do the things that no one's doing. And as I was meditating over all of this stuff, going, God, why are you doing this? And just over the past 2 years, even since, because you guys, if you don't know much about it, right about the time that we're leading up to the election, middle of September, my mother falls, who's living with us. We were a caregiver. She falls and she's in the hospital. She's in rehab. She's back in the hospital in the ICU, and then she dies middle of October. I was pretty much running the church from the hospital room, trying to take care of my mom and my kid. My wife's trying to take care of kids and carry all this stuff. And I've never had we had another church in town call us, go, hey, can we bring you food? And I'm like, no, and I started listing off everything that's going on in our life. I'm like, yeah, we probably would be good. I've never been at that place. We've never had somebody bring us food when we didn't have a baby. That's weird when you cross that threshold, sometimes when you get so bad there. And I'm like, it was just a devastating point. It killed me that year. Praise God, we got out alive. Why are you doing this, God? But the more I got into things, the more I see there are less people. And if there's anybody on Facebook Live watching this and you're in politics, I apologize for what I'm about to say. But that arena is bereft of people who are there to make disciples. It just is. I don't meet a lot. A lot of people who use a Christian phrase to get a vote. I don't know if they're really living it in their lives. But I know that's our purpose. I know that's her purpose, is to make disciples. And he was saying, if you're going to reach the people that nobody's reaching, and I don't know anybody who wants to be in politics. They think it's all a cesspool of crap anyway, don't you? Right? Why would I want to go into that? If you want to reach the people that nobody's reaching, you have to go to the places that nobody's going. You have to do the things that nobody's doing. And God was telling me, that's why I had you do that. That's why I had you do that when you're launching your church, because I want you to understand that it's not just going to be about the people in here. If it can't, it has to be about the people out there. And for Palm Bay, for us to reach Palm Bay, it's got to be about going to the people that nobody's going to. It's got to be going and doing the things that nobody's doing. And part of what we're looking at in Palm Bay as we look as how we move forward is what are we going to do in Palm Bay? What is already being done? What needs to be done? God, Don't just send us to the things that are already being done so we can recreate what someone else is doing. What do you want us to do that's not being done that we can fix? How do we pull our weight in a different way? And that's what God is really leading us to do. But what is God calling you to do personally? Because that's a lot of vision stuff. That's a lot of, hey, here's some nebulous things. And I'm going to tell you, I've got some ideas for our church and what we're going to be doing. And I'm going to share real quickly in a couple minutes some things that we're going to be doing moving forward. But I wanted to share too, because this is an individual sermon. This is something that we all need to take a look at personally. When your car isn't getting good gas mileage, or it's kind of running rough or something like that, I found out, I don't know much about cars, but I found out that you go check out your tires, right? Things could be out of a line. You could have some problems. You check the tire pressure. That'll do a lot, right? If you've got a tire that's going low, it rides rough. Your gas mileage goes down and stuff like that. You check the PSI of your tire, pressure per square inch. You check the PSI to see kind of where are you? Are they all balanced? Are they all about the same stuff? Or is one given a problem? Well, I wanted to do that. That's what I felt led to ask you, and I'm going to be doing for our church. I want to check our PSI. First thing I want us to check is our prayer. In Jeremiah 29:7, the first thing he tells the exiles, I want you to work for the welfare of the city, but I want you to pray for it. Let's ask an honest question. You don't have to say it out loud, but I want you to ask yourself this question. When is the last time that you prayed for this city to come to know Jesus? All of it. When's the last time you opened your mind up big enough to even ask God for that? Do you think it's futile? It's worthless? Not going to happen? You think you'll go to be with Jesus before that happens? What everybody in exile in Babylon, they thought we were never going to, God said plan to stay. You may not leave, but I want you to work for this city. I want you to pray for it. Are you praying for this city? That's something that I feel like that we need to do. John 15:5, Jesus said that apart from me, we can do nothing. There's nothing that we're going to do. There's not enough people we can say, we can't carry enough MREs. We can't do anything enough to fix this community without Christ, and if we don't pray for it. So here's what I'm going to call and challenge you and I to do. For the next 21 days, here's what I want you to do, okay? This is a checklist if you're a checklist person. If you want to get out your Google Calendar and put a repeating event, I want you to do this. For the next 21 days, I want you to spend time in prayer with God about our city. God, do a work in our city. This is what I want you to pray. Do something in our city that no one could deny that it wasn't you. That's double negatives, but you know what I mean. That even people who don't believe in you, they'd have no choice but to say, wow, God did this. Will you do that with me? For 21 days. But also I want you to ask God to do a mighty thing, but I want you to ask God this, what do you want me to do as part of that? With an open hand and open heart, say, look, if you tell me, I'm going to do it. God is not about giving wisdom and direction when we choose that, when we treat that as an option. God is about giving us direction when He says, okay, you're ready to hear it. I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're going to take that option and do it. But that's going to take you spending time with God each day. But I'm going to ask you to do that for the next 21 days. Next 21 days, I want you to do that. Then we have the S, which is share. Realistically, when is the last time anyone in this room shared the gospel, the good news of Christ, with someone who does not know Jesus? I know we know people that don't. We work with them. And we see how they act, and we know they don't know. But when's the last time you actually did? And I'm not saying that to beat you up or guilt you. But at some point, we have to really be honest with ourselves. We can't gloss over it and say, well, I kinda don't kinda. When's the last time you told somebody that sin was a problem and you can see it in their life, but you have a solution, and that's Jesus? And He can save them, forgive them, and move them forward. When's the last time you did that to someone that you know? I'm going to tell you something right now. You have more power to do that than anybody who wears the title of pastor. Now, I have power to do that, but it's a different thing, I think, because I feel like in our culture, there's a marriage of our culture and what God has called us to do. Right now, when you buy something on Amazon, what do? Do you call a salesman? No, you look at the reviews, right? You go down in, it's a 5-star, or do I like this? Or how are they using it? Or if somebody, your neighbor, this is where you will talk to your neighbors. Hey, they've got a weed eater. Hey, Joe, how's that weed eater work? Is that good? What is that? Is that a Black & Decker? Do you like the electric weed eater? You know why? Because you think they know more than a salesman. Because a salesman's trying to get your money. They're just going to tell you what the truth is, right? When people look at you, that's how they look at you. The power of the end user is amazing. Why do you think there are social media influencers on TV that just do little YouTube things and work, well, I work in this, and I'm just going to show you how to paint this thing right here, or change this thing, or, this is a good deal for me, or this is how, but last night somebody was talking about using some insecticide on their lawn, and so I can't remember the name of it. It's Roundup. Yeah, that's what it was. Don't use that. Everybody's, don't use that. Don't use Roundup. Don't use Roundup. And I'm looking on this dude's website, and he's like, I am a licensed, person that, I don't know if they're licensed or not, but he has a business. He said, I've had a business for 40 years of taking care of lawns and maintenance. And I'm going to tell you, I use Roundup on my own lawn. All of a sudden, I'm sitting there going, okay. All right, everybody says don't use Roundup, but why are they telling me not to use Roundup? This dude does it, and he knows what he's talking about, because I don't know that dude from Adam's House Cat, but all of a sudden there was something about him just being honest, not needing anything from me, no stock in, what was it, Monsanto or whatever? I don't know what makes Roundup or whatever. I mean, he's not going to get any more money for telling me that. Just somebody just giving me their opinion, all of a sudden it makes sense to me, because they're not asking anything from me, they're just telling me the truth. You know what? That's you. I have circles where that's me. It's a lot of the circles where people don't really know me as a pastor. They know me as a pastor second, and they know me as Jim first. But you know what? You can't buy that type of influence. And you have it. Why not share the gospel with others? I've always said that I think it's a fail if we invite people to our friends to our church, and the first time they ever hear about Jesus is right here. We're going to always tell you about Jesus. We're always going to tell you the gospel. That's what we're about. We're always trying to make disciples. That's what we're going to do. But if you invite a friend and the first time they hear it is me telling them that, man, I feel like that's a fail. They should see it in your life. You should have told them a bunch of times. And when you get here, you say, see that guy? Yeah, see, I told you. See? He makes a lot of sense. He's funny. He's not too fat either. So you should look at it. Yeah, that's what's up. You should share. But not only that, I want to tell you too, we've got some things coming up that are going to be available. I'm going to be sending out an email, let everybody know if you have a problem. How do I talk to my friends about Christ? There's a guy coming who wrote a book called Contagious Christianity. It's going to be at the Church of Viera in a couple of weeks. I'm going to send an email out with all the details about that. If y'all want to get together and go, hey, it's cool. It's on Tuesday night. I can't go, but I already know how to talk to my friends about Jesus. But if you want to go do that, that's a part. It's just to show up, and he's going to share some easy ways to do that. We want to train you in that. We're going to be working on that more over the course of this year. But also the I is investing in others. Seriously, who do you have in your life that you've targeted that doesn't know Christ, that you're like, you know what, I'm going to make sure they know about Jesus? They may not accept him. They may think I'm crazy. They may talk about something I did 20 years ago that was stupid and immature and sinful, and go, how in the world are you even saying that to me right now? And you're going to double down on it and say, you know what, God forgave me. I'm going to keep going. I hope I never do it again. Do you have somebody? If you don't, you should. You should ask God, who is that person that I need to share who Christ is with? Who do I need to invest in? Do I need to come up with a relationship? Sometimes, it's hard. We said about the 5-year thing. Maybe you're in the 5-year thing. You don't have a lot of relationships. So maybe you need to go start something. I wonder sometimes, like I said, God was saying, there have been so many people that I've met through Katie running for school board that I never would have met any other way. I've been able to sit down with Democrats that are very liberal, and we talk about faith, and I can listen to what they say, and I feel like I've made headway in them understanding what Jesus is and some of the things that need to change. In our church, in our culture. And I'm not saying Democrats don't know Jesus or whatever. I'm not trying to do that route. No, not at all. It's been amazing when something goes down in the city. I met a dude and something went down and he was in the middle of it, and he was an elected guy, and he calls me at like 10 o'clock in the morning, 10 o'clock at night, and wants to pray about it. Can you pray for me, Jim? Can you pray for me? I don't know. And he's literally doesn't know what to do. And I'm going, why in the world are you calling me, man? I just met you like a couple times over. You know why? I'm a Christian. He knows. or the only one that he's telling them that they know Christ, or that's demonstrating that they follow Christ, that's a shame. My wife was telling me about somebody that she's taught, periodically she'll tell me about a story. Somebody comes up and talks to her about it, and they just start telling their life story to her or something like that. And it's just like, God has placed me here. I've got to stop my agenda and invest in this person. Where are the places that you see that no one's investing? And is God leading you there? I'm going to tell you, it's going to cost you. It's going to be difficult. You're going to lose sleep. It's going to be some hard questions, but I'm going to tell you that God is faithful. And when Jesus said, I'm with you always to the end of the age, he was real. And he said, I'm going to supply everything you need to say. So there's no reason to be afraid. Usually the decisions made out of fear are not really from God, because God doesn't give us a spirit of fear. So if you're making decisions based out of fear, that's probably the wrong one. But we're going to invest in this. I want us to be a people that looks for the holes and the cracks in the Christian coverage of what we do and said, you know what, maybe I'm uniquely positioned. God put me here. Have you asked God lately, why did God put me here? Why did you put me here, God? And not ask him because, why did you put me here because I don't like it? Don't say that. I want you to say, God, why did you put me here? What do you want me to be doing? And stop looking at yourself in the mirror and going, ooh, me. Stop. Look around you and say, okay, what opportunities do I have to influence this world for you? Where's my opportunity? Because God doesn't give you problems. God doesn't give you holes. God gives you opportunities. We're the ones that choose to call it problems and holes and stuff like that. God puts you in a place and he says, look, he'll take you and put you in the middle of the country where people don't love you and they don't love Jesus and they don't care. And God's put you there for a reason, because he wants you to be part of the agent of change. Are you willing to do that? Are you willing to invest? Because investment costs. It costs time, it costs money, it costs energy. Are you willing to do that for Christ? Are you willing to do that to make a change? Those are the things that I want us to be looking at over this next year. I want you to pray up your prayer life for this city. I want you to begin to look at the people and say, I'm going to share what I know about Christ, even if it sounds stupid. And I don't think I know as much as somebody else. Forget that. I'm going to trust the Lord to bring me my words, and I'm going to say it. And I'm going to invest in people around me, even some of the toxic people who are hard to be around. Now, if you plan to do that, I'm going to make a suggestion. I would be part of a life group or have a close group of people around you that love Jesus so they can help you and carry you, because that's going to be a tough thing. Investment costs. Give God as many opportunities to replenish you as he can.
Thanks for being part of Bay West today. Bay West Church meets at 100 Emerson Drive in Palm Bay at 11 a.m. on Sundays. You can find out more at baywestchurch.com, or you can follow us on Facebook at Bay West Church.